Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Bunny Zine BZCast. I'm your host, Randy. This is, of course, the Bunny Zine podcast, or the Bunny Zine, the podcast of BunnyZine.com. It's 30 seconds in, I'm already screwing stuff up. Again, this is the podcast of BunnyZine.com. You can find the show on YouTube.com, Soundcloud.com, and on iTunes. Our social media pages are Bunny Zine on Facebook. We are at Official BZine on Twitter and Official Bunny Zine on Instagram. Couple of things today before I bring in my guest. As you guys can see by the title of this episode, that I will go into an explanation before I bring my guest in. For the title of the episode is, I'm sure you guys are really curious to see what it means. But I will definitely dive into it. I just released an episode on Thursday the 17th, I believe. It was Thursday night the 17th with our guest, Make Mine Chocolate. I think Carrie was a representative of Make Mine Chocolate, of their very awesome campaign for warning others about adopting rabbits as Easter presents. So make sure you guys tune in to that episode. It's a little under an hour long. We dive very deep into the campaign and other campaigns that Make Mine Chocolate have inspired. It was actually really cool to see them they were on a local news network. You should look up Columbus House Rabbit Society and Make Mine Chocolate. They posted a link for it. So that's really cool. They were on TV for a few minutes to talk about rabbits being adopted as Easter presents, which is really nice. That's really cool to see that they're getting some very deserved airtime for their campaign. Again, the other campaign that's really big that Bunny Zine supports is the Not Just for Easter campaign, the hashtag Not Just the number 4 Easter campaign. I believe that's www.tinyurl.com/notjust the number 4 Easter. That website has different ways that you can participate in that campaign. A lot of different ways, whether it's through social media, whether it's through flyers, or there's so many different ways. If you want to participate in that campaign before Easter comes up, make sure you visit the website, www.tinyurl.com/notjustforeaster. Before I go into the main topic of the show, I wanted to give a shout out and basically free advertisement to Penny Collins of Regarding Comic. Regarding Comic is the very, very popular cartoon page that started on Tumblr, and now it's on Facebook and Twitter as well. If you guys like and follow them, you guys should definitely like and follow them. They're very funny. They can also be very informal, more towards the comedy side, but also can be very informal. As I'm recording this, she's starting a certain series of cartoons that goes into warning others about adopting bunnies as Easter presents. She did a very cool, as I said on Facebook earlier this week, maybe it was like Monday or Tuesday, that I'm a huge Daredevil fan. And Penny and I were messaging each other back and forth. And she made this cool poster mashup where she put her bunnies into the poster and it called it Bun Devil. And it was really cool. It was really, really awesome of her. And she might get she always has a cartoon in our e-magazines. Just so you guys remember that, she always has one in there. And they're very, very funny. We might be for the April issue, we might have one that expands a little more. Like, she might do a couple other cartoons that are maybe possibly related to like movies and TV shows. We're still kind of talking back and forth about it. But a quick shout out again to Penny Collins of Regarding Comic. If you're on Tumblr, make sure you follow Regarding Comic. If you're on Twitter and Facebook, make sure you follow and like them. Again, that's Regarding Comic. It's like I think the profile pictures is like a brown cartoon bunny, and I believe that's Sammy. So before I bring in my guest, the title of the episode, which as I'm recording this, I don't know what it will be. It might be like a breeder's perspective, something along those lines. It is. My guest is someone who used to be used to be a breeder, and then went on, just become just someone that just loved and housed, had rabbits in her home. Her and I have had a lot of conversations before this show has started over the phone about how we would approach this episode and how everything would kind of run down. Only because this is a very, very different topic. We're obviously coming off of the horrible tragedy that was Wheels at Overlook Acres. We'll probably talk more about that. And I know myself, and I know a lot of you have kind of had a bad taste in your mouth when it comes to breeders after that incident. And breeders are generally regarded as people that are on the other side of the fence, like the evil bunny people of the world. And I'm going to be incredibly fair as I possibly can. Incredibly fair as I possibly can be. There in our conversations that my guest and I have had, there are things that she said that have bothered me, not things that she particularly done, but things that are done in the breeding community and the way things are approached. But my guest has been very honest and very genuine about what goes on. She's also here to provide some light that might change your guys' mind a little bit. That maybe we all kind of group breeders that they're all this. Every single one of them are these like evil people that kind of do it to they do it irresponsibly. They wreck, destroy the bunny's health and put too many, they sell them, and then the bunnies end up on the street and end up in shelters and etc. You guys basically know what you already think of breeders before I'm even recording. All I'm saying is to listen to the show and put a more fair, less biased approach to this episode, because I think it's very important to listen to the other, what a lot of us considers, like I said, the other side of the fence, the other side of people that again are regarded as like quote unquote the enemy. So again, I know we all have a bad taste in our mouth about the Overlook Acres farm, and we all should be rightfully, I don't really swear, but we should all be rightfully pissed off about that situation because it's horrible. Those people do not deserve a dime. But this is different. This is very, very different. So when you're listening to this, try to separate that situation from what my guest is talking about, because they are two different. They're just two different things. Overlook Acres Farm was their, this own group of people or family-run thing, I don't even know, that took advantage of a baby rabbit that couldn't walk and took advantage of people's compassion and love for the rabbit through videos and whatever Kickstarter campaign pages or whatever. That's a completely different story. And compared to what we're going to talk about today, when it comes to breeders. That was a lot to talk about, but again, I wanted to get that point across before we started this show, to at least, think about it a little bit, about being a little more fair when you're listening to this episode. Again, me as a host of the show and me, talking to my guest, I'm still not comfortable with some of the things that we've talked about and some of the things that are handled, but I would just be a little more open to what she has to say, and that's pretty much it. I would like to bring in my guest, Katherine. Katherine, how are you doing?
Good, thank you, Randy. Thank you for the introduction.
Oh, no problem. again, me and you. I've said it earlier in the show. I'm going to preference this again that me and you have talked basically for like 2 hours over in different conversations that we've had over the phone about this show. Just because it is a very, very touchy subject amongst like people that love their bunnies. I love house rabbits. So the first thing that's I think one of the very first things to dive into is why does someone go into breeding?
Well, that can be a very complicated question. Some people grow up in farm families, and they've always had a few rabbits in there and sort of do it for family reasons. For my own part, I was a suburban girl growing up. I had rabbits, and in those days you couldn't spay or neuter them, so I had my first litter of rabbits by accident. There were two bunnies that were supposed to be boys, and in fact one of them was not. Spaying wasn't available, and this was something that happened all the time, that you had people who were bunny owners and bunny lovers inadvertent litters and needing to care for them. But that experience also made it easier for me later to go from being a house rabbit person in my 30s. I had 4 house rabbits that were just the life of the party, into breeding. And a lot of that had to do with my ex-husband, who was very interested in the showing of rabbits. And I think one really has to distinguish between people who are breeding to get a quality, healthy rabbit for showing and winning purposes as a kind of hobby from the really disgusting commercial breeders and some of their practices. To me, they're two different worlds. I think maybe I may be able to tell you some anecdotes and things about breeders who really love their rabbits. Not quite exactly as you do, but they do love them. So anyway, that's basically with my husband, who had a barn and wanted to do something with the barn and thought it would be wonderful to breed and show Flemish Giant rabbits. So I'd never had a Flemish Giant. That was an experience. The first Flemish Giant I ever had revolutionized my world. He would run across the room to greet me every single time. My other 3 didn't run across the room to greet me, but he did. So I was smitten with Flemish Giants and very happy to be working with them. But that's probably what's the next question?
Well, you actually talked about you brought up the show rabbits versus commercial breeders. That was one of the things I had noted as my talking point. So if you could just while you just brought it up, dive into the difference in your perspective between people who breed for show rabbits and commercial breeders.
Right. Commercial breeders, you have 2 types. You have, 3 types actually. You have those that are breeding the rabbits and selling them for meat. You have those that are breeding them. I don't think they can do it in this country as much anymore, but certainly in China, they breed them for their fur, which is awful. And then you have those that breed them for kind of puppy mills and pet stores. And then you have the hobbyists who breed them for show purposes and are part of a show circuit, which has informal standards of care and hopefully educates people that come in its ambit how to care for and build a really good bunny who's healthy and who thrives. So, did I get off the topic?
No, it's okay. I know where you're coming from. Where, like, the commercial breeders, there's not that much what you're basically saying is the commercial breeders, there isn't that much care for their mental or physical health, where the show rabbits are at the very least dependent on, on the rabbit looking great and healthy.
Yes.
Okay. A talking point that me and you discussed before the show today, again, we pretty much have talked about everything before the show today, is breeding, people that breed for social status versus breeding for money. I think both, to me, and not to me, but like just make me, either way, whether it's social status or money, kind of makes me feel, it makes me feel uncomfortable it's just like...
Well, I don't know that I would call it social status. There's a community of rabbit breeders, and yes, there is some status in it. If someone's been a master breeder, if someone's been a really leader in the community and teaching other people and having healthy rabbits, they will be called a master breeder. But it's a social, it's a show circuit that people travel along. They go, the same show will happen every year, and people regularly go to a certain set of shows, and they meet and get to know the other breeders of their type of breed pretty well. And for those who are in it for a very long time, it's the other people who are really what it's about. It's not about winning. That's kind of sort of your excuse for getting together with you and your rabbits and other people. It's very, I would say it's more social than social status.
So for the people that, because when you and I were talking about this beforehand, they were talking about this as generally that this is an exhausting, committed hobby, but for what people get out of it, it's, I don't know. To me, like, it's just kind of confusing outside of the fact that you do going into a community of other breeders. But
I think sometimes there is competition, and it's very suspenseful. And I think that's what hooks people in. It's the suspense of a competition, that when your rabbit's on the table, how's he going to do? It's very suspenseful. And rabbit shows are really boring to go to if you don't have a rabbit to show. But I think that's really why people keep coming back. It's the suspense of having to wait for your rabbit to be judged and seeing how it does.
Okay.
The competition, the taste of the competition itself is exciting for them.
Okay, because like if you can real quick dive into like what goes into, like, as I said, like an exhausting commitment is basically how you laid it out to me before we started talking live on the show. What goes into that exhausting commitment when it becomes a breeder's for people who do it right? And
okay. I will say beforehand that I had a long commute. Not everybody has a long commute, so it's not always as exhausting. But, rabbits are very care intensive. They need to have sanitary hutches. If they're not sanitary, the rabbit's going to get sick.
Mm-hmm.
And, the whole place has to be sanitary, because if one rabbit gets sick, you could have the whole place getting sick. And so you have quarantine quarters that you keep. But I was up very early in the morning before work. I spent about an hour and a half with them, feeding them, looking them over, just spending quality time with them. And it was really fun because my does all knew that I would be in at 5 o'clock, and they all held their litters until I came through the door. And it always took me by surprise. I'd hear this squeak, 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 and I'd say, we've got a mouse. And then I realized, no, one of my does is giving birth right now.
Oh, geez.
And so it was really a close thing. I mean, they would wait till I was there. And when I left my husband, there were 2 does that were pregnant, and they would not drop their babies until I came into the barn, and then they went into labor. So certainly for the rabbits, the relationship is hugely important, just as it is for the human. You really have to watch out for them. Some people take more care, some people take less care about whether they're willing to sell any of their rabbits, and whether to pet owners or not. That I know that sounds like it's flipping the equation, but breeders know rabbit behavior very well if they're going to stay in it for very long. And they're aware of the stupid people who want to buy it as a Easter present and who don't know how to handle or respect a rabbit. So many of them choose to just care for all of their rabbits and not even consider selling any of them because they don't think that a pet owner can give them as good a care. And of course, from your angle, you're sitting there going, how could they possibly have this misperception? But we all know about the people who own them without having learned enough about them, and then don't realize that rabbits' relationships are really important to them, and you devastate a rabbit when you take away its meaningful relationships. People will get this rabbit, and then I hate to say it, but we all know it, they dump it, and that's when the wonderful rescue organizations play such a critical role. I'm very grateful for them. But yeah, there actually are breeders who worry about people not knowing where they to sell them their rabbits.
You talked about the breeders kind of knowing, and some of them actually having connections like you did with your rabbits in the barn. But at the same time, if your rabbits are in outside enclosure, is that pretty common amongst breeders to have, because I can't imagine every single breeder out there is on a farm. So what is that a general outlier, or not outlier, but general outline for breeders is to keep them in a barn while they're in the house?
Well, if you can. But you're right, a lot of people don't have barns, and it's harder to take care of them and keep their temperatures regulated if they're all the way outdoors. What's going to happen is the rabbit's not going to live as long. It's just a rabbit stresses when it has to adjust its temperature to hot temperature outside, cold temperature outside, and it simply shortens the span of the rabbit's life to go through all those temperature changes. There are some really well-built and well-designed, good designs for outdoor hutches, what your climate is, what region of the country you're in. But a lot of people don't know that much about rabbits. Your backyard breeder typically will really not have the kind of protection that it should have in its hutches. And that's a problem. I have 3 right now, and one came from a shelter, and the other came from a rabbit rescue. And the one who came from the rabbit rescue was rescued from a backyard breeder. It was hot summer, and she had no water. And she was in the sun. It's just awful. You have backyard breeders who really shouldn't be out there breeding. And it's because it's unregulated, they will keep doing that, I guess.
That's the thing I was going to go into is you and I have talked about ARBA, the American Rabbits Rabbit Breeding Association. I think I said that right.
Mm-hmm.
So there, just to kind of sum it up, there is no like regulations. There is no there's no particular like breeding license, or it's not really monitored. ARBA is just there to kind of run these events for the shows.
Right. They regulate the shows. They license the judges who judge at the shows. You can make yourself your rabbitry an ARBA registered rabbitry, but it really doesn't mean anything. You have people. It's just basically an expense that you buy a piece of paper that you might impress someone with. It doesn't. It doesn't really tell you anything more or less about the rabbitry if they say they're ARBA certified, because ARBA doesn't send anyone down there to inspect them and see if they reach a certain standard. All they do is they pay for this license and this right to hang up this piece of paper, and it's absolutely meaningless.
Okay. Going back to, this is going back a little bit, but going back about the litters, I just as someone who doesn't know, and if I had someone who is like, I don't know, like someone with like a house rabbit society, and they can also probably give me an answer on this as well. But like, I don't know, like you said, that when we talked before the show, there were people who do this, who breed their doe, their girl bunny way too much. What would, if a breeder that's responsible and actually loves and cares their rabbits, what's safe for the doe?
I think the general rule is no more than twice a year, and honestly, like with a big rabbit, with my Flemish, once a year. Flemish have very big litters. The doe needs to fatten up beforehand, and the kits nurse it right out of her. It's stressful on the doe nursing her kits, as well as giving birth and being pregnant. They shouldn't be bred that often, and if they're not going to be bred, they absolutely should be spayed, because their bodies are still preparing to have babies in a way that will lead them to get uterine cancer. So it's not a nice thing to do to a doe, to keep her and neither breed nor spay her. That's very bad for her health. That's just negligent as far as I'm concerned. They'll stay healthy if they aren't spayed, if you continue to breed them, but you can't keep them inactive. They'll get cancer.
So if they breed, or if they have a litter and then they don't have a litter, like let's say you skip a year, they're more, in your opinion, they're more prone to being sick or getting cancer?
Skipping a year wouldn't do it, but if you say, well, like with Flemish, you generally want to breed them before the end of the first year. And if you were not to breed until the second year, the doe might not be fertile. There's kind of like a window on activating all that stuff. And she may get cancer from not being bred. She needs to be spayed. They can miss other than that year, they can miss a year of breeding and be fine. And certainly you want to retire them after a pretty short period of time. I have known some, in the history of the sport, some really standout does that have had litters through 8 years, but most of them go dry at about 4 years, and they've sure got a lot of life left. And so with my rabbits, I spayed them and let them be happily retired once they were done breeding.
So what age would a normal breeder, like on average educated, quote unquote, rabbit educated breeders stop breeding their rabbit?
It's hard to say. Most of my experience is with Flemish, which are, as a larger rabbit, have a slightly different time frame than a smaller rabbit. Small rabbits usually reach sexual maturity at 6 months. Flemish doesn't really reach it till 10 months, and I would argue not really even till a year. The big rabbits have shorter lifespans, and I think they tend to have a shorter breeding period. I don't know much about, how long a smaller rabbit would be able to be fertile and be healthy at the same time, because I haven't worked with them in that capacity. They're probably a little bit longer because they have long lives.
Okay. These two talking points I'll kind of just tie together. The two talking points that I kind of just had noted here were the rights for bunnies, and the rights is more so the respect that they should be given by anyone, whether it's someone who's a parent, who's taking care of a bunny like a house rabbit, or a breeder, and health, the bunny's health, and veterinarians. So you said in one of our conversations before the show that you actually had a veterinarian that took care of your like groups of bunnies. Like, is that pretty common amongst like a normal average breeder?
It's surprisingly less common than it should be. A lot of rabbit breeders don't know that this is an option in most state laws for the vet to do. A lot of vets aren't really trained to do it, but you can have a farm vet, and the farm vet comes out once a year, inspects your premises, that his satisfaction you're keeping these rabbits in a healthy environment, and that you know how to care for them for all their life cycle needs. He'll assess your kind of basic knowledge of things, and he will give you medicines that you're able to use under the appropriate circumstances, because he knows and he's allowed to do this. And it's also very helpful because if you get an infectious disease, you can take the one bunny to the vet, get it diagnosed, and all the herd can get the medicine for it. The vet doesn't have to individually examine each one and run up your vet bill. Sadly, a lot of people don't know this is an option. Some people end up doing it informally. Some rabbit breeders are, over the years, able to develop a good relationship. But, vets see so many of these dumped rabbits and so many of these rabbits that haven't been taken care of, that they tend to not want to work with any breeder, which is sad, because then someone who's responsible and is creating a healthier rabbit is going to have trouble finding a vet that will take care of them. But I understand totally these vets deal with some really crisis cases, and so I can understand why they're not that enthused unless they come from a farm or agricultural background about being a herd vet.
So I can imagine that being like a huge pain, because for just people that are house rabbit, just regular normal people with house rabbits in their homes that they love and care for, they sometimes have trouble finding an exotic veterinarian that could take care of rabbits. So sometimes it's very hard to find a good one. So would a breeder still continue to go on, like, just talking generally? I'm sure every situation is, every specific situation is different, but if a breeder couldn't find someone who did it, would they generally continue on to doing it, or like continue breeding if they couldn't find a specific herd vet?
Yeah, and most don't have a herd vet. There's through the agricultural community, because the breeding community is fundamentally from the agricultural side of America's history.
Mm-hmm.
The small farm, which is disappearing, so probably a lot of rabbit breeding will disappear with that. They have this collected wisdom about basic, what is it called, antibiotics and things like this, which are available in farm stores over the counter without a prescription. So they can do a certain degree of medical administration as knowledgeable agricultural people. And that's the amount of care they get. And typically what happens is they don't have a herd vet. They go on the knowledge that they do have. They go on other breeders' knowledge. And then if a rabbit has extraordinary thing that they don't understand, then they'll take it to a vet.
Okay.
But there are those who don't even take them to vet. I will grant you that.
Okay. So just to kind of outline this again, breeding in general, not outline it, but kind of sum up a couple other points. While there are people that are way more responsible than others, and maybe they actually watch, take care and watch for the health of their rabbits. And sure, some of them have the rabbits actually like in their home with space. The big outlying problem is that there is no regulations. There's no license. There's no like inspections of being a licensed breeder to make sure that everything is taken care of in the right way, that the money is being taken care of in the right way. And I think, to me, it's still a giant key problem.
I would agree with you.
Yeah, it's still kind of like disturbing that it's something that should be, because you can really, really, damage a bunny's health if this is really, really done wrong. And I'm speaking as someone who's not educated in this at all. My education in this is coming from our conversations and this show that we're recording right now. That since this isn't looked over, and anyone can register under ARBA and kind of show up to these shows, but still could be, not taking good care of the rabbit and not giving it the proper respect that it deserves.
Well, the sad thing is, mostly those people won't survive in the show world. They won't have success. They'll just go off and do it on their own. They won't learn from the experienced breeders, and that's really sad, because there are rabbits that are suffering. And there are, honestly, one of the worst things you can do from a breeder's perspective is breed rabbits that aren't the best, because you're getting down into weak rabbits, and you don't want to create a weak rabbit. So many times these backyard breeders are starting out with not very good stock, and they're weakening the rabbit breed with poor breeding practices. So you would definitely want it regulated, and people like that shouldn't be doing it.
And when you talk about like the weak and the strong, you're talking about like their basically like just their health, right? If a rabbit is not properly taken care of and it's breeding way too much, you're gonna have, I would assume, more rabbits born as like special needs rabbits, or just born sick and born not well.
Well, and you also you have like minor things that you learn, like if a bunny's toes point outward a lot, if they're crow-footed, they have a hip position that's not going to make it easy for them to breed. So you wouldn't breed a bunny like that.
Okay.
And people don't know little hints like that. Flemish Giants, and for those of you who are Flemish Giant fans, one of the reasons Flemish Giants are so docile, it's just an unwritten rule in the rabbit community of breeders for Flemish that if a rabbit bites, it doesn't get bred.
Okay.
And that's part of why you have the really nice temperament in the Flemish, is they have been a little bit selected for personality in that regard. Anyway, I'm rambling. What's the next question that you'd like to ask me?
No, that's actually a good point. I was going to bring up that. So a what would consider to be like a responsible moral breeder. Some people listening to this wouldn't believe that even exists, but I'm just laying it out in the question. For a responsible moral breeder, they do pay attention to more than just like physical features. They pay attention to character and emotions and personality.
Oh, yes. And, every breeder has its favorites, his or her favorites. You can't help doing that. You don't want to. But every breeder has their favorites. And, when they sadly die, they're buried with respect. And, they're retired and adored in their retirement because they can hop around all, and not worry about it. And there's a true fondness and a true appreciation of character. Other people just are less observant. And so I wouldn't say that every breeder is like that, but you most certainly do find, especially the female breeders, when the kids are little, you bring them into your bed and you handle them a lot so that they're used to being handled, and you always play like the radio in the barn so that they're always familiar with how a different human being would sound, so that when they meet different human beings, they're ready to deal with it. So there's, some people are really protective and sensitive, and then there are those who aren't.
Okay. When it comes to what the heck was I gonna ask? You said, Flemishes, when you did Flemish Giants, you did like one breed a year, or one like litter a year. And I don't know this personally, so that's what I'm asking, but does breeding in general, even if it's one litter a year, for example, for any rabbit, does that cut down on the rabbit's lifespan?
Not as far as I know. Usually what will happen is if the rabbit is going to be really drained by it, they become infertile. If you really did manage to breed them as frequently as some of the commercial breeders do, you probably would shorten their lifespan. But I don't, they were born to reproduce. And, it's funny because you would think, rabbits have this reputation for being so fertile, and anytime they get together, there's more bunnies. And that's just not the way. When you're a breeder and you're keeping your bucks separate from your does, and they only get together once, a lot of times it doesn't take. So you can be waiting a long time, and quite a bit over a year, because you started breeding at a year, but it didn't take the first month, and you have to wait a whole another month to try again. So they're not. They don't immediately conceive as much as they have the reputation of that when they're kept together. It often can be quite frustrating to get to time the litter appropriately.
Okay.
For good weather and things like that.
Going back real quickly to Arba, I previously did have a guest on. I mean, it was months ago. It was maybe in last August. It was someone with the Rabbit Advocacy Network, and they specifically brought up Arba as being on the other side. Is Arba looked at like the evil by the people in the the house rabbit community, or is Arba given that? How is Arba, in your perspective, given that label?
Well, Arba does regulate commercial. Well, not regulate. They do help commercial breeders.
Okay.
So I don't like that part of Arba. That's a part of Arba I'd like to see go away. But it's not going to until more regulations are put in place. So I think, people are perfectly justified in being against Arba because they support commercial breeding. I don't know that on the show side, the kind of hobby side, that it's necessarily so evil. But I know there is a great deal of antipathy on both sides and a great deal of misunderstanding on both sides. And I wish it weren't that way, because I think we could educate rabbit owners better if we weren't busy being angry with ourselves, with each other. There's a lot to learn in handling rabbits, as I'm sure you've been learning. And when there's a low kind of cultural level of knowledge, then that's when the kids are making the mistakes, because you as an adult couldn't tell them not to, because you lack the knowledge. And that's you don't want it to be that way. You want it to be an advanced rabbit culture where anyone who has a rabbit knows how to handle it, is eager to learn how to handle it better, knows they have a 12-year commitment to this animal, knows that the rabbit takes the rabbit's relationship with that person as seriously as the person does the relationship to the rabbit. And then the rabbit knows it's dependent on this person. And, it's a very emotional thing for the rabbit. It's tied in it with its health. I think increasingly we're in cities and we're not agricultural, so increasingly you are going to have house rabbits as pets. And let's educate the people that are going to be getting the pets so that they treat them properly, and go against commercial breeding as, kind of disrespect for life. But I think there is a role for the small-scale show breeder, because they're interested in creating a healthy, beautiful rabbit. I think there is a role for them.
Okay. There's 2 more points, and then we'll close out our show. This show. The very, very big situation, I talked about it in the beginning of the show, that recently happened sometime in the last month. I don't remember the exact date, like the news broke, but was the Overlook Acres situation, and the wheels situation. Like I said in the intro, I know that's still fresh in the memory of a lot of people. There's a very pretty popular, not as popular as the Dodo, I would say, but popular website that does talk about animal rights and other things in animal rights, called, I think it's onegreenplanet.org, and they just did a story. I didn't get a chance to really look into it. Author, I've read her work before. She's done pieces on like Kroger and Whole Foods. But again, it is still a very fresh topic, and it still has people looking, it makes them say, oh, every breeder is, like a POS. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So,
I get curious. Nobody should be able to do that.
So I think, for what's your opinion and perspective on the Overlook Acres situation?
Well, I only got information from one article, and I don't think it was the authoritative article. I didn't read the Dodo one. I did not. There are probably a lot more facts that weren't in this article. I thought it was disgusting. I thought it was grotesque because I didn't think there was a lot of evidence that it was caring for. I mean, this article indicated that there were other kits, baby bunnies. There were other kits that were freezing to death, and that this little guy had been freezing to death, and that the only reason he was rescued was to kind of show him off in this cart or something. But kits should never be freezing. A good rabbit breeder collects for all year and makes sure the nests are warm enough. That's ridiculous. You don't have babies freezing to death. That's negligence. That's cruelty. I would hope it was criminal.
Yeah. So what? That's got to, for someone. I mean, you're not in like the breeding as a hobby thing, breeding show rabbits anymore. But that's got to be, another negative notch against them. Whether it's, just for a normal person looking from the outside, that, I knew when the news broke that before I even had any conversations with you, that not every breeder is like that this is a very extreme situation. I still lean towards the side of not being comfortable with the whole breeding situation, but I knew I'm not sitting here thinking that, all the, I don't know, thousands of breeders in the U.S. are this horribly, extremely bad.
Oh yeah, we're a product of what we've seen. I don't think I would have done rabbit breeding if my rabbits when I was young had not accidentally had a litter.
Yeah.
Because I think, and that doesn't happen now because you're able to spay and neuter your rabbit. I believe that rabbitry was a commercial rabbitry, and I don't believe in commercial rabbitry. So I would be totally with you in your indignation at what goes on in a commercial rabbitry. And I will admit I'm always thinking about things like animal rights law and what does this mean when we apply it? And I don't know all the answers, but I know that there's a lot of progress we can make in securing good and healthy lives for our rabbits. To me, a rabbit is a personality, and it's your job as the owner to help that rabbit just as you would help a child develop to its full potential of personality and social behavior. And
so
people who don't.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so the very last talking point that I was gonna bring up before we close our part of the show is sorry. Again, I think I said it in the intro, and I said it just a few minutes ago, that you do not do this anymore. You don't breed show rabbits anymore. And when me and you talked before the show started, I don't want to get into your personal life too deeply, but you did kind of relate it to that you and your ex-husband divorced, and that was part of the reason. But you also said there was things in the breeding community that really bothered you. So that also were part of the reason why you didn't continue doing it. What were the things that bothered you outside of
Well,
your personal situation with your ex-husband, to not breed anymore?
They're different personality types, and I'm someone who's happier with house rabbits than as a rabbit breeder. Every time I lost a kit, and the sad truth is, rabbit veterinary science is about what human medical science was in 1800. That stuff for kits is not very well advanced, so you lose kits. You lose kits the way humans lost babies back in the 1800s. And that's a huge burden to bear. And you lose adult rabbits that are your friends, because rabbits' lifespans are shorter than human lifespans, that you have your heart broken more times because you have more bunny friends. So the losses pile up. And it's sort of, I think it was a good part of my education, and that I have learned everything that I wanted to learn, and it was just time to move on. I did have some problems with, beyond my personal feelings. Yes, there were some practices that I don't approve of, but basically it was personality type, that I'm just someone who's happier off as a house bunny owner and rescuing rabbits and volunteering at the rabbit shelter than I am showing them.
Okay, and one more last one. I know I've been saying that for like the last 2 minutes. Was there, you and I have separated the commercial rabbit breeding compared to show rabbit breeding, but was there anything specific outside of the bunnies passing away? Was there anything that bothered you in the practices of show rabbit breeding to lead to you not breeding anymore?
There were things I didn't like. There were things other breeders did that would make a person indignant. But that wouldn't have been why I stopped doing it. I mean, I was relieved to stop doing it. It was very intensive work. It's a lot of work. I think for me, I could only keep doing it that long. But yeah, there are practices, but I think I had kind of made a deal with myself that, maybe this would contribute to HRS and ARBA getting along better, and maybe I could just accept these people as they grew up in the country. This is what they learned in their tradition. Our society is evolving. We're not going to be accepting those things in our tradition. They're going to winnow away, if you were. But it's kind of like making a deal with the devil. You just, I just didn't deal with some of those issues. I kind of put them aside. Well, so-and-so does that, but I'm not a part of it. And, as long as you accept that some people would say, yes, you are a part of it. So, does that answer your question well enough? I think I was like clear as mud.
No, I get what you were saying. Like there's just certain things that other breeders were doing that probably weren't right. Whatever you do, this is just like a general outlook as a hobby or as a. I don't know. It's different. It's hard to make in comparison because you can't really compare like a normal hobby sport to a hobby that involves a living animal. But anytime that someone is doing something wrong, this is a stupid comparison, but like when someone is in a sport. I don't know, like people can view like baseball or something like that as a hobby and a sport. When someone is like cheating or doing something wrong,
they get kicked out.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
Well, that also bothers the other people that are in that hobby. You know what I'm saying? Like the only, like I said, this is not a very good comparison at all, but it's the only one I could think of off the top of my head. It's like today's current. I follow a lot of sports, probably way too much. In today's like current era of Major League Baseball, for example, the guys who get caught on steroids and other illegal substances that advance their game, hit the baseball farther, just as a general outlook on it, are frowned upon. It wasn't like that 15, 16 years ago in the late 90s, early 2000s, but it is now. Those guys aren't as respected in their locker rooms and in their, in their amongst their peers.
Well, it plays out two ways in the rabbit world. One is when they're caught.
Yeah.
And when they're caught, they're thrown out of their club. I can tell you a really funny story about that. It take a little bit of time. But one of the colors of the Flemish giant is called blue, which really looks gray, but they call it blue.
Yeah.
And a blue Flemish giant is supposed to have all blue toenails. Well, they don't always end up with all blue toenails. So these really highly respected breeders at one competition painted their toenails with ink. And they got caught. They got blown out, and they were totally thrown out of the rabbit community there. The rabbits were disqualified. They were humiliated. They disappeared. But then you do have what happens when someone is not trusted as a responsible person. You don't let them buy your rabbits. That's kind of the inner community kind of rejects them, and they have trouble getting the rabbits they want to breed, and hopefully they leave.
So yeah, when it comes,
so they are shunned.
Yeah, so when it comes to the shows, and like a judge sees something that's wrong with the rabbit or something that's off to where that leads them to believe that the breeder isn't doing something right, is that made like known in public to the other breeders that are there?
Oh yeah. I mean, if the rabbit has anything wrong with it, if it's not perfectly healthy, it will be disqualified. And its owner, they have a system that sounds awful of tattoos to identify the rabbits, so you don't immediately know who the owner is. But the owner is found, the rabbit is taken off the table, and the owner is reprimanded for bringing a sick rabbit to a rabbit show where other rabbits could get sick from it. It's washed down very carefully to disinfect wherever that rabbit's been. You'll hear judges. It sounds kind of funny. Does are really difficult to handle if they're not getting bred enough, and you'll hear a judge light into an owner because this doe needs to be bred, which sounds odd, but that's just the lingo that's used and the sorts of things that go on.
Okay. Well, Katherine, again, thank you for being such a good guest. Was there? Well, I always ask this to everyone, and it would only be fair to ask you as well. Was there any other closing points that you wanted to bring up before we ended the show?
Just that I really admire and respect people who are doing like the Make Mine chocolate, and then not just for Easter. I think the more we can educate the public and people who are starting out in rabbits and educate them well, that would be wonderful, and I hope to be a part of that, having come through the breeding world. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Katherine. It was a very, very good laid out show, and you should be able to see this later in the week, maybe Thursday or Friday or something like that. And again, thank you for coming on. Thank you for expanding on just a world that's not looked at very well, and being honest with your answers and everything else.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity, because I think what you're doing is really wonderful. And I want to encourage you and support you in your outreach to the rabbit community. And see these things advance.
Well, thank you, Catherine. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll talk again later, of course, and you have a good day.
Okay, thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Again, everyone, that was friend Catherine. She went into a lot of different talking points about breeding, and again, some things still bother me in the way that the breeding, in the way that things are handled. Again, I'm not someone that was like an HRS educator who would have been like a fair host would probably have like more like health related and physical questions to ask. As someone that I'm not, and I'm not an educator, I'm just, I just have a passion to help people and talk about bunnies with people. Someone who is like an HRS educator or something could probably dive more into like the physical, any physical and health issues in comparison with breeding. I was definitely not, what's the word I'm looking for? I definitely wasn't suited to answer those kind of, or ask those kind of questions, because I am not someone who's just in the know. When it comes to my rabbits, I know things to look for and signs and all that, but when it comes to the physical, by health, interior health, of a rabbit in comparison with breeding and that kind of stuff, I'm just not someone who knows that. But we did dive into a lot of topics. So I basically just want to ask you guys, what do you think? What do you guys think? I would like to hear in the email. That's bunnyzincast@gmail.com. bunnyzincast@gmail.com. You can leave comments on the Twitter or the Facebook. You can leave comments on YouTube. What do you guys think? Did Catherine change your perspective at all on what you guys think of breeders? I've always had the feeling, and like I said earlier in the show, before I even ever had a conversation with Catherine, when breeders were brought up as a topic like months ago, again, like a long time, like a couple months ago, someone like messaged the Bunny Zine page saying, hey, this breeder is leaving a whole bunch of comments. She's this and blah, blah, blah. And it was just something that was had to be taken care of internally by the Bunny Zine team. But I know there's different levels and different ways that people do it. And that was way before my conversation with Catherine, that not everyone is as god-awful as Overlook Acres is. All right, so that was something I knew like way beforehand, that there are people who generally, breed their rabbit a couple of times while still loving and caring for them. Personally, my personal opinion is I still, after listening to it, I would, if I met a breeder and I saw their situation and how they had to care for the rabbit, I might give them more benefit of the doubt and more respect for how they do their hobby. But it still doesn't resonate with me that well. Still doesn't make me feel that comfortable even listening to that. But at the same time, I know there's people that are in that community that do love and care for their rabbits. But with how people view breeding, I think we all think about like the people Catherine and I call like the backyard breeders, like the people that just immorally did it wrong, did it without doing research. Those are the people that they all should be watched over. They all should be licensed, regulated. If it's legal, if it's going to be legal, it should be something that should be regulated and legal and monitored. Like it should be like inspected upon, like at any given random time. You know what I mean? Like, this shouldn't be something that should go unwatched at all. Because there's, we didn't get into it a lot, but it was kind of tied into commercial breeding, was the people that do it for, the meat rabbit breeders, which is something that the people on the show rabbit side do not condone at all. The people on the show, according to our guest Katherine, those people don't condone meat rabbit breeders, and they don't condone people who sell their rabbits for money. We should have gotten more into that, but that was something Katherine had said to me before the show started, that was something that most people in the show rabbit community aren't for. That they're there to do this as a hobby, to have rabbits as a pet, but also to have, show them off at shows as a hobby and create their own little community. Which, I don't know. Again, it still doesn't make me very comfortable, but after listening to all of that, but I would, like I said, if I saw someone's certain situation, I would give them more benefit of the doubt and more respect about how they do this hobby. It bothers me in general that it's just like a hobby. It bothers me in general that a living animal is involved in to me, it's such a ridiculous hobby to me. That, it's not given the proper care and proper respect because of someone's hobby that's probably kind of dumb, but I don't know. Most of us listen to me talk right now, we don't view rabbits as a quote unquote hobby. We view them as family. We view them as, if you view them as like something like your children, you're like your kids. And we don't, as humans, as people, we don't mix our kids with as like, hobbies. Like, it kind of reminds me of the stupid TLC show where they have like the toddlers and tiaras or some stupid like that. That I don't agree with either. I mean, that's obviously not as like brutally managed as like backyard breeders, but that's my like human comparison I can think of, where like there is no reason at all, to me personally, for someone to have their kid up there and in a dress and showing off and stuff, unless that's a parent's hobby. That's not the kid's hobby, that's the parent's hobby. That's my feeling about it. I know I'm going completely off topic, but that's my feeling about it. That's a parent's hobby that they're having their kid involved in. So I don't view that well either. That to me is stupid. But again, I'm talking to someone who's not a parent, so what do I know? Again, I'm going way too off topic. I should just end the show. Social media pages, we're Bunnyzine, at official Bunnyzine on Instagram, official Bzine on Twitter. By the time you guys hear this episode, April 1st will be right around the corner. New issue, the first of every month, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be awesome. And please share and subscribe these podcast episodes. Shout out to Karen again for having some guts to come on the show and talk about a subject and a thing that most of us hate, and shedding some light on some of the people who do take this more seriously and handle it better than others. Again, that's my final take on everything, guys. You take care. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.